Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and this morning we're visiting with Sarah Rodriguez, author of From Depths We Rise, A Journey of Beauty from Ashes. Sarah, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sarah is a blogger, author, speaker at Journey of Sarah, and also has contributed to the Huffington Post. She's the creator of the Choose Joy Project, a random act of kindness initiative to honor the life of her late husband, Joel. Her life's greatest role is that of mommy to Milo and Ellis. Sarah is a one-time New York City transplant who now makes her home in Oklahoma, where the best sunsets on earth are found. Sarah, this story, A Journey of Beauty from Ashes, a story of heartbreak, loss, hope, and God's redemptive plan. To kind of highlight, there were some really high-level significant events, and if you wouldn't mind, just kind of rattle them off for us, because I want people to feel the magnitude of what happened from March of 2004 to December of 2014. Over the course of a 10-year period, there was a tsunami in your life.
Yeah, it started with a marriage. After marriage was a journey through infertility. After infertility was a journey with cancer. After cancer came pregnancy, but loss of a twin. After that came another battle with cancer, the death of my husband, widowhood, single parenthood, the miraculous birth of my daughter, and then almost losing her to bacterial meningitis at 2 weeks old. So it was, like you said, tsunami is the perfect word, because it was one catastrophic event after the next.
And yet, your book is a testimony to the greatness of God.
Absolutely. I am stubborn by nature. I'm a fighter by nature. And I decided very early on, actually, my late husband and I decided that if we were going to walk through the worst events of our lives, we called them the depths, and that's where the title of the book came from, that we were going to make sure that what we were walking through was used to give glory to Him, to give honor to Him, that all would see and know Him through and in us. And that was the thing that we held on to time after time again. It was our landing place, our foundation of what we came back to, that we were going to make sure that nothing we walked through was in vain.
Now, where did this drive to bring honor and glory to God come from? It had to have deep roots in your life and your upbringing and in your walk with the Lord. Where did this invincibility, because God was your shield, He was your defense, He was your ensign, He was your protector?
Well, I grew up in a Christian home, but I like to say that my life was fairly normal and non-eventful up until these events. My faith had never been tested to the degree that it was tested throughout this time in my life. But all throughout my life, I would say that there was always this closeness with the Lord, getting away into secret places. I remember one of my favorite things to do. I was a worship leader for many years, and so I would love to just go in closets and turn on music and sing and just be in relation with Him. And I feel like it was during those times that He was building something within me that I didn't even know, a trust and a love between each other that would have to carry me into that next season. And as we so often don't know the things He's doing with us in preparation for what's to come, I think there was a really steady stream of years that He was building something within me that I would need to go to that next level with Him.
Now, what's interesting, though, is that this was your foundation, and now you meet Joel, Hispanic background. So here you're blonde-haired and Midwest, and he's Hispanic in New York City.
Yes.
How did that come together?
Well, yeah, we were an unlikely duo. He was born and raised in Spanish Harlem in a very rough area, very different backgrounds. But after I graduated from Bible college, I did an internship working with inner city kids in Brooklyn, and that was life changing for me. Just being around people so different from me, but just having heart connections with one another. And so after that was done, I moved back to Oklahoma, but my heart was just drawing me back to New York, and I knew it was something that there was a purpose for me being there. And so my parents kept saying, we don't really want you to go unless you find a job. And so me, again, that stubbornness, I found one. I called the lady, convinced her to hire me over the phone. That was on a Friday. She said, can you be here on a Monday? And I did. And yeah, from that point on, just connected with friends and in a church, and met him through that group of people. And it was just kind of one event after the next where our paths kept crossing.
And what did you see in him that mirrored this almost immovable rock that you had already been prepared in your prayer closet? God was calling you out. He was separating you from the rest. He wanted you alone to pour into you. Then you meet Joel, and you meet him in a ministry setting. And what was it that you saw in his heart that said, "This, I'm the rock. I'm tenacious." You could be hard to get along with. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you driven, focused, driven. Was he the counterpart to that, or was he the same as that, and it was the binding of steel?
Well, my parents always joked as I was a child growing up. They said, we are very interested in seeing who God brings for you to marry, because it's going to have to be somebody special. Because I was, from a kid, even growing up, I was a very spunky, feisty little girl. And so not just any person could have stepped into that role in my life. And I was very attracted to the fact that he came from humble upbringings, and he really was a fighter, and he wasn't intimidated at all by my spunkiness. He had also just walked through, a few years prior, the loss of his mother from cancer. His father was battling cancer when I met him as well. And so I was able to see and connect with the side of him that saw deeper meaning and purpose and eternal value to life. And so I think it was both of those things, his fighter spirit, but also there was a depth to him that I hadn't experienced with very many people before.
So the two of you meet, you marry in 2005, and 6-7 months after you marry, you move back to Oklahoma.
Yeah, we would have loved to have stayed in New York, but it is so expensive to live there. And immediately at the forefront of our minds was starting a family. And so we wanted to be able to, like most people, give our children greater than what we had. And that was going to be hard in New York. So we moved back to my home state of Oklahoma and bought a house and got jobs and just dove into what we thought would just be typical, normal life.
And everything was going fine. You're working on having a family, and you find out.
Yeah, we had struggled.
No conception.
Yeah, we had struggled with infertility for about 5 years. And that is a journey in and of itself, and it's not something that's talked about a lot. Just the strain that it puts on couples in a marriage, and the strain it puts on a woman when you're trying to just do what you feel like you were created to do, and it's not happening. And so I tell people that was really the first true test of, I always just assumed it would happen, and when it wasn't, why was it not happening, and why were my prayers not being answered? And because I had prayed and wept and fasted and all these things, and it wasn't happening. And so that was my first true test of like, okay, am I still going to believe in the goodness of God when what I'm asking of him is seemingly falling on deaf ears?
Now, a husband and a wife go through infertility together.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes, if it's the husband who maybe it's motility or maybe it's viability, whatever it is, it impacts his manhood, his psyche, his strength. It calls him into question. And on this, by the same token, for a woman who may have reproductive problems, may have issues with viability of eggs, some of the technical aspects of it, also then questions and becomes a very, in vitro fertilization is a deliberate process that is invasive. It is everything is regimented and scheduled and performance based according to a calendar and a thermometer.
Yes. And it gets very technical. And for us, we had the diagnosis of unexplained infertility, which is almost worse, because I felt like I just wanted the doctors to tell us what was wrong so we could fix it. But they couldn't figure out why we were unable to conceive. And it's hard. It was hard for him and hard for me. And during that season, I feel like he really had to lift me up a lot, because I was the one, going through the most. And especially once IVF began with the shots and all of those things, it's the most unnatural and hardest way ever to get pregnant. But it's worth it, because you get to see your dream, of becoming a mom realized. But it's not an easy process. And it was, that 5 years, it was a very difficult season for us both.
In that 5-year period, talk to me about your prayer life. Talk to me about God using this to be the glue, or was this something where you found that this cord of 3 strands was being strained, that he's holding one strand of the 3 strands, you're holding on, or are you at this complete unity?
I feel like, as with so often with faith, there is the wrestle. The nature of the wrestle. There are definitely times when it felt like it was something that was drawing the two of us and the Lord together. And there's other times where I felt the separation and the tension of us both doubting. But as for me, I kind of, along with pulling closer to my husband, I tried to also go inward, because at the end of the day, it's about myself and the Lord and where we stand. I knew that my husband had to work that out between he and God. But as for me, what I was responsible for was my relationship with him. And so one of the things that we did and we both decided on was, I think it was about 3 years in, we decided that we were going to build a nursery. And there was no reason to build a nursery, because we had nothing on the horizon of having a child. But that was kind of us putting out that expectation before God, that even though it doesn't look like in the natural that anything is coming, and it actually looks as hopeless as it's ever looked before, but we're going to go ahead and just put that out there in faith. And that actually became a place that I would go in and just pray. And it was a really peaceful space for me. And I would sit in that rocker and just like pour out my heart before God. And now that I look back, that was kind of another closet moment. Whereas when I was in, college, it was the closet. When I was an adult, it was the nursery. But again, it was just that space where he was building me up within myself, and just using this battle for the next battle that was to come.
But it actually is, there's an old axiom that says that if you're really a believer and you pray for rain and you walk out of the house without an umbrella, then are you really a believer?
Yeah. I mean, I believed that somehow, some way, that I would be a mom, because that was the desire of my heart. And I believed that it was a God-given desire placed within me. So I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know if it would be through adoption or through IVF or through just a miraculous pregnancy. I didn't know, but I just trusted that that stirring in my heart was placed within me for a purpose.
Did you find that the longer this went on, the support system around you began to change. Early on, people are very, very encouraging, but a year, 2 years, 3 years, they've got their own stuff and they begin to focus. Did you find your support system? Were you in a good, solid church family? Did you have family members supporting you and walking this walk?
Absolutely. We did have a strong community of friends, church community, family around us. I didn't tell a lot of people that it was something that we were walking through. It felt so private and intimate to me that it wasn't something that I shared with the entire world, but I did have a small group of about 5 or 6 girls that knew and that were committed to praying with us and for us and believing and hoping for us. But infertility is just one of those things, again, it's not talked about often. And so a lot of people would come up unknowingly and say, well, when are you guys going to get on having kids? Not knowing that we had been trying at that point for years and years. And that was kind of hurtful. And it taught me, to never ask questions like that, because you never know what kind of battle somebody's facing behind closed doors.
We work closely with a couple, the Khans, it's K-A-H-A-N, that their ministry is infertility. They went through it and have not been successful. And they talked about what happens when that is the outcome. And it's become a huge ministry. And in their ministry, they discovered that 40% of all couples deal with infertility.
Wow.
40% of all married couples. It is a dark secret. It is hidden so far in the darkness, and I think that is part of how the enemy uses it, is by keeping it in the darkness. So their commitment was, they were in a journal of their story that they went through IVF and it didn't work. So they put their intentionality of getting pregnant on hold. So we're going to park it for a while, but we're going to bring this out of the darkness and into the light, because if 40% of all married couples are struggling with this dark secret and they feel like they're alone in it, or they can only have 4 or 5. Imagine the power of prayer, of a community of warriors and intercessors. And I can think of 50 people right now that if I said to them, 40% of all married couples are struggling with infertility, that they would organize a worldwide intercession group for infertility. That's their calling. That's what they would do. So this is what the Khans are trying to do, and it's a staggering number. But your marriage continues. You love each other. You built this nursery together, and now you're coming up on your anniversary, and you go to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, we had decided, we'd gotten to the point where the doctor said that there's nothing more that can be done, and so IVF was kind of our final shot, and we were just about to begin the process. And one day, I'll never forget that night that we were just sitting at home, and my husband comes into the room where I was, and he said, there's something weird just happened. And I said, what? And he said, I passed blood in my urine. And I thought, that's weird. I had just had kidney stones a few months prior, so I immediately told him I think it's probably that. And he eventually went to the doctor, and we got the news, which was the shock of our lives, that he had cancer of the kidney. And so suddenly our mind, which had been invested in all things infertility, we're now having to completely shift our focus, and now it became not about battling for a child, but the battle for his life.
And this was no small tumor.
No, they said that it was about the size of a football. They couldn't believe that he had never had any symptoms. In fact, we had both trained for and ran a half marathon just a few weeks prior. And it still blows my mind to think that he did that with that big of a tumor in his abdomen. It's just absolutely unbelievable.
In all this in vitro it makes you think that why didn't the doctors catch this? You're looking at the male anatomy, you're investigating the causes of what is involved, and why was this not discovered so much earlier?
Yeah, that's one of those things that you scratch your head about, because he had blood work done, and if this had been an ongoing thing, why, his white blood count, I mean, it just goes on and on of why it wasn't caught earlier. It's one of those things I'll never know or understand.
Well, you have a series of mysteries that you're dealing with as to why haven't you had a child? Then you go through this process with your husband, and you delay your anniversary. He has surgery, and the surgery is successful. And you come out of it and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and move forward and take this trip to Puerto Rico. Yeah, one of the really interesting things is, because we had dealt with infertility when he had his surgery and they told us he would need chemo, we had done our research and we knew that chemo could render a man sterile. Right. And so before he did chemo, we made sure to bank some of his semen in order to hopefully that help us with our journey with infertility down the line. And I know this is kind of an uncomfortable topic to talk about, but I tell people that because if you are in the stage of your life where you're still trying to plan your family and you're diagnosed with cancer, that's something that you really need to research and understand your options, because had we not, we could have that could have affected our chance to ever have a family. And so it's by the grace of God that we knew those things and we had those conversations. And so because of that, as soon as he was done with chemo, we were able to dive right in, whereas they told us we would have had to wait years and years for all of that to repopulate. So we were able to dive right in, and we got pregnant our very first try with twins, actually. And I lost one of the twins at the end of my first trimester, which was devastating because we had so deeply wanted both children, but was able to carry my son, Milo, to term. So it's a lot to grasp in this journey, but at the very core of it is an unconditional faith, an unwavering faith. Although many times I'm sure you ask the question, why, Lord? Why are we going through infertility? Why are we going through cancer? Why are we going through all of this?
Yeah, there were so many times. I mean, there's a mystery in God. I mean, his ways and thoughts are higher than ours. That's what it says in the Bible. And we know that to be true, but at the same time, the whole entire process, we had seen his provision in ways that we had never seen before. And there were too many things that happened to be coincidence. And so it wasn't ever a thing where we thought, we wonder if this whole God thing is even real, because we had seen time and time again him provide for us in ways that were supernatural and miraculous, truly. So when it came time to the things that we didn't understand, that was just part of the wrestle of, I don't understand, but your goodness isn't conditional upon what I'm seeing with my eyes. I know there's something going on behind the scenes, and that's like what I'm grasping at. And sometimes you feel like you're grasping at straws, and other times you feel like it's so close to you that you just get it. You get it. But that was part of the wrestle and the tension of during this entire season.
Well, we're talking with Sarah Rodriguez, who's walking us through this journey of beauty from ashes, straight from her book, newly released, From Depths We Rise. We've chronicled not even half of this journey, and hearing you speak continues to make me think, as I did as I read the book, that this is the story of Joseph. That regardless of the circumstance, There was no utterance from his lips of condemnation for God. He did not complain. He took the circumstance that he was placed in, and the time that God used to put him in these circumstances was to prepare and refine him for an ultimate assignment, where he could finally say in Genesis 50, what you meant for evil, God worked for his good, so that many would be saved. So I see a lot of that in this. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue in this conversation with Sarah Rodriguez, author of From Depths We Rise, A Journey of Beauty from Ashes, a miraculous story of hope and overcoming, truly a journey of beauty from ashes. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're visiting with Sarah Rodriguez, author of From Depths We Rise, A Journey of Beauty from Ashes. Sarah, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much.
We have chronicled on one side of it, journey of love, of marriage, of service to the Lord, of praise, of worship, of struggle, and obstacles along the way. Mm-hmm. And you conceive twins after Joel is considered to be cancer-free. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like hope and then hope again. Mm-hmm. Exponential hope. We have our answer, and now our oldest prayer is answered at the same time. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of that, you find that you were pregnant with twins, and in a routine ultrasound you find that one of them is no longer there, that one of the twins didn't make it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Within 6 months, you're now delivered the news that Joel's cancer's returned and spread to his lungs, and his biopsy falls on the same week as Milo's birth, and you wait to celebrate the birth of the child, putting off getting the biopsy results. Mm-hmm. You truly wanted to honor this prayer that had been answered, mm-hmm. setting fear aside and removing the grip of fear on you to rejoice in the birth of your child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at that point, cancer had robbed so much from us and taken so much from us. And we were just determined in that moment that even though it was the elephant in the corner of the room, we knew what we were facing, and we most likely knew that it had returned, but we just wanted to celebrate the birth of our son and the miracle that he was, and live in that moment as much as possible.
So what happens from there?
From there, we got the news a couple days after his birth that the cancer had returned, and they immediately put him back on chemo. And he did chemo for 6 months, and the tumor went away, and they told us to take a break for a couple months and then come back and see where we stood. And in the course of that break, the cancer totally returned back to pre-chemo size. And so they told us at this point it's too aggressive. Chemo's not going to work. We need to do a surgery to remove half of his lung and the tumor that resides within. And we really wrestled with that decision because he had just had surgery a couple years prior to remove a kidney, and it was frightening. My son was 10 months old at the time, but we were basically told that that was our only choice. And so we reluctantly went in to have that surgery, and he had the surgery. It was successful. He came out of it, and the next day I'd gone home to get a couple hours of sleep. The next morning returned, and he was not responding on his left side, and they determined that he had a stroke. A blood clot had gone to his brain, and they didn't think that he would make it even through the night, so they immediately took him back to surgery. Removed a portion of his skull to allow his brain to swell, all in the hopes of saving his life. And again, it's another situation where, at one point we were talking about infertility, then we're talking about cancer. Well, now we're going from cancer to talking about stroke, and it just seemed like it was just a snowball thing. And they said that he wouldn't survive, and miraculously he did survive. He was paralyzed on his left side, and he was sent to a rehab facility to try to regain use of that side of his body.
But ultimately on July 23rd, just 4 days from now, the anniversary of his passing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The timing of this interview, we were originally supposed to talk months ago, and here we are 4 days away from the memorial, and you do something on July 23rd each year in memory of Joel. What is that?
It's called the Choose Joy Project, and when the first anniversary of his death was on the horizon, I started thinking, how do I, want to get through that day? I knew it would be hard, and I made the choice that I was going to take that day and do something powerful with it and take the sting away from death. I say a lot that we don't always have the choice in life of what happens, but we do have the power and the choice of how we're going to respond to what life has given us. And so we wanted to take that day and make it about honoring him and about doing something good. We wanted to see goodness rising from these ashes. And so he loved giving to others. That was one of his favorite things to do. So I put the word out on my blog, hey, let's do a random acts of kindness day where everybody just goes out and does something kind for others, and we hand people a card directing them back to my website so they can hear about our story and why they received the random act of kindness. But it was incredible. Hundreds of families were a part, and they still are, 4 years later every year. And it's become a day that we oddly kind of look forward to, because we get to go out, and it's just unlike any other day of our year. And my kids now are old enough to where they're a part of it, and they know that that's how they honor their father's life. And so, I feel like choosing joy is a powerful concept, because in the midst of devastation, if we can find a way to choose joy, because a lot of times it is a choice. I don't feel joy on this day, but I'm going to choose it, that there's so much power in that. And so it's become such a powerful day for us as a family every year.
This really is beauty from ashes, that you took the strength the Lord had given you, that whatever you did, you would do it to honor him in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, in good times and in bad times, till death do you part. The reminder of your vows at your wedding, the vows that most people make, they forget. They forget that this was the covenant they entered into, that they were to become one, and that God would bless the unity but could never bless the divide. And because you and Joel stayed unified, you planned for the future, you set plans in motion according to the leading of the Lord. You built a nursery. Noah built an ark. There was no sign of rain. There had never been rain. There was no hope given to you, but you chose to walk in hope. Your victory was in your response to your circumstances. It was not in your circumstances. Your victory is never in your circumstances. Your victory is always in your response to your circumstances.
Yeah.
So after his death and the discussion you and Joel had, you decided to begin another round of in vitro fertilization.
I had 2 embryos left, and the clinic, every clinic is different and has different rules, but the clinic we use will not destroy embryos. They believe it's life.
Right.
And so I had a decision to make. Did I want to just keep paying to bank them indefinitely? You can actually adopt your embryos out to another couple. There's lots of different options. And so I was kind of wrestling with what to do. It was a very unique choice, to know that my husband had passed away, but yet a piece of him and I, remains in this embryo. And we had a conversation when he was in rehab one day. He said, I need to talk to you about something. And I said, what? And he said, you and I are going to have another child, and it's going to be a little girl. And I said, I kind of looked at him like, okay, I don't know if that can happen. I'm looking at our life circumstances now thinking, it's impossible. But he said, no, I need you to understand this. We're going to have a little girl, and you know what to name her. And I had a dream years prior about having a little girl, and her name was Ellis. And I looked up the meaning of the name, and the name meant Jehovah is God. And coincidentally, that's the meaning of the name Joel, is Jehovah is God. And so we had always kind of tucked that name in our back pocket. If we ever had a girl, this is what we would name her. And so after his death, knowing that I had these last final embryos remaining, I couldn't get the thought out of my head, him saying we were going to have another girl, and there was purpose and meaning for her life. And so 6 months after a lot of thought and prayer and talking to those closest to me, I made the decision to put the embryos in, knowing that there's only like a 40% chance that it would even work. I left it in the hands of God, and I did become pregnant, and it was a little girl, and I named her Ellis, just like he had said would happen.
So, November 6, 2014, a beautiful, healthy baby girl, Ellis Clare, comes into this world as a living memorial to her father.
Yeah, our beauty from ashes, our joy from mourning is what we said. Incredible gift, incredibly unconventional. Every nurse and doctor at the hospital knew our story, and I feel like everybody kind of felt like we were a part of a holy moment in her birth. It was just miraculous from the start.
And it would be so amazing if the story ended there.
I thought it would.
But 2 weeks later,
2 weeks later, she woke up warm and lethargic and cranky and just not herself. And so I called our pediatrician, and she recommended we come in. And by that night, we had been transferred to a children's hospital, and my healthy baby girl was placed on a ventilator and diagnosed with sepsis and bacterial meningitis, and we were given absolutely no hope for her to live. So here I have this girl, this purpose, this miracle from the Lord, and all of a sudden we're in a fight for her life. And in less than a year and a half time, I'm seeing another person I love placed on a ventilator and told that we were going to lose her.
In that moment, your thoughts?
I would say devastated, incredulous, totally at my lowest point, questioning God, God's purposes, not God, questioning his purposes more than ever before. My friends came in and they were like, well, we're just going to battle it out. We're just going to pray and believe for her. And I'm like telling them, I don't have anything left within me. I'm still recovering from a battle for my husband's life a year and a half ago. And the Bible talks about a mustard seed, and I feel like that analogy is so overused, but that's literally about what I had, is the smallest speck of a seed of faith. And my friends who are incredible would tell me, that's okay. Like, we'll lift up your arms during this time. We'll be your Aaron. You believe of what you have within you, and we'll believe for the rest. And they were incredible in that way. And what's interesting to me is even at that lowest point, I would still go to bed every night and just say, I believe that you can do it. I believe that you can heal her. I don't understand all the whys. I don't understand the how of why you choose in your sovereignty to answer a prayer one time or not. I don't understand even healing and when and how it happens. But at my core, I believe, and I know that you can, and that's what I'm going to keep going back to, and I'm going to keep asking for her life. And that's what I did every day, day after day, for weeks on end. I begged God for her life.
You finally hit the point where the doctors tell you, we've done all we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had done CT scans and MRIs of her brain. They said that it was more than halfway dead. She had at that point stopped breathing along with her ventilator. The machines were keeping her alive, and so they came and they said, we've done all we can do. She was seizing constantly. She was on 7 different medications, and those could not control the seizing. So they said she will not live, but if she does, she will be in a vegetative state, hospitalized. Like, there is absolutely no hope. And so I made the gut-wrenching decision for the second time to pull somebody I love off of a ventilator. And I had told them how I wanted to tell her goodbye. I wanted her skin to skin on my chest, just the way she had entered. And I wanted to rock her and sing to her and read her a book. And so that's what we did. She was 30 days old. It was her 1-month birthday when we pulled her off the vent and expected to say goodbye.
And what happened?
And they took every cord off of her except one little cord on her toe to monitor her vitals out at the nurse's station. And they were going to come in and tell us when she died. And it was interesting because my family was in there. My girlfriends who had just been in the room when my husband died were now in here with me to say goodbye to Ellis. And I rocked her. I told her I was proud of her. I told her that she would get to meet her daddy and that I was jealous of her in a way, that she would get to be with him and to not be afraid. And as I rocked her, she started breathing on her own. She hadn't taken a breath in weeks. And she started breathing on her own. She stopped seizing, and she lived miraculously. And the nurses have said it's a miracle that she was able to go from vent air to room air. I mean, there's so many things. It's a miracle that she stopped seizing once we pulled her off of all the medications. But they were astounded. They didn't know what to do with us, so they put us in a room called a butterfly room to where she could go and die the next day. But she didn't die the next day, and so then they sent us home on hospice thinking that she would die within a week, and she didn't die within a week. And we knew, within that day and in those moments when she started to breathe, everybody in the room, the expectation level just rose. And it really was like life from death. I mean, she was in that moment supposed to die, and it was like seeing somebody raised from the dead. It was absolutely incredible.
And how is she today?
Well, she's 2.5. She'll actually be 3 in November, and she is amazing. She is still in physical therapy and occupational therapy, and it is still a journey. I don't want to paint a completely rosy picture that everything is totally fine, because it's not. We're still walking out the process of her healing, and she goes about once a week, and she has doctors and everybody to help her. But she is like me. She's as stubborn and feisty as her mom is, and we've been told that will serve her well in her recovery. But she does so many things, sitting up and rolling and saying words, and she feeds herself and all of these things that we were told she would never do. She time and time again is doing them, and she amazes me every single day.
What compelled you to share this journey? What was your message? Who were you talking to?
Well, I started a blog whenever my husband was first diagnosed with cancer, just as a way to keep in touch with friends and family about what was happening. And then people started sharing it. And then I started just writing about not just this doctor's appointment or that, but what I was learning in the journey. And I started seeing people really respond to it. And then by the time Ellis was in the hospital, the blog went so far and wide. It reached we had readers in almost every country. And at points in time, we were having 1 million visitors a day reading her story. And I was getting emails from people just all over the world telling us how touched they were by her story. And so that had an effect, and it was so cool to see such hard, difficult moments being used for greater purpose and greater glory. And I kind of felt like I was just in the middle of this story that God was weaving and writing, and I was a part of it. And I just had to be a steward of being willing to tell and share what he was doing, and not just the good, easy parts, but the hard, difficult moments, and talking about suffering and talking about when things don't go the way that you thought they would, but just continuing to move forward and allowing him to use us where we're at. And so we've just tried to model that in the good times and the bad.
If you had one thing you could say right now to the audience that's in the midst of overwhelming hardship, total despair, have lost sight of the goodness and the greatness of God, who feel alone, not just unworthy, they feel worthless. Like God has just abandoned them, forgotten them. You had no less than 7 opportunities to go to that place and stay there. But you didn't. What would you say to them?
You know, it sounds really simple, but I would just say to keep going. Because when you're in the middle of complete devastation, it's so hard to see to the other side of the story. And there were times, you know, in my frailty and my humanness that I did want to give up. And I was like, this is too much. Like, how much can one family take? How much can we keep walking through? And it would have been really easy. You know, you mentioned Joseph. I also relate a lot of our story to Job when he was just going through difficulty after difficulty. And even those around him were like, give it up, man. Like, curse God and die. You know, where is he? He's not with you. But he just kept saying no, like, even though he gives and even though he takes away, I'm going to bless his name. And then it talks about at the end of his story, like, everything was returned to him twofold. And he talked about, I love the scripture where he said, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes had seen. And I talk about in the book, like, it's words on a page until you're living it. But then when you go through suffering, there's things produced within you, and you get to see and know him in ways that you could have never experienced before. But you will never get the opportunity to experience that if you give up in the middle of it. With whatever shred of hope that you have within you, hold on to that lifeline and let him see you to the other side, because he doesn't promise that we won't suffer, but he promises his goodness. He promises he will restore. He promises he will redeem. And I'm living that on the other side of it. Even the book is a redemption moment. Even talking to you right now and sharing our story is a redemptive moment. So I would just say, keep going.
You heard it here from one who is not a psychologist, someone who is not an academic, but someone who has lived this journey of turning her mourning into dancing, who's found in the depth of her faith the ability to press through obstacles that are on a par with Job, of hope and defeat and despair and death, but yet out of it came life and hope and promise. There's so many of you going through your circumstance today that say, God's forgotten me. Lord, why have you forsaken me? And Sarah has shared a story so profound, so transparent, but so identifiable with that I encourage you to go on this journey with her, because in this journey you will find yourself in the same circumstances, and when you look at her response, it gives you permission to doubt, it gives you permission to question, it gives you permission to cry out, it gives you permission to say, I don't get it, but I will trust in your unfailing love. Will you be like Sarah Rodriguez, who has chosen to trust in his unfailing love as she takes you on a journey? From depths we rise, a journey of beauty from ashes. Sarah, thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing this time with us, for taking us on this journey, and for being faithful to giving God the glory for what you have, not for what you lost.
Thank you so much.
In your inventory of life, it's about what He's given you, not what He's taken from you. And if we maintain that attitude, we too can find that we will have the strength to rise from these depths. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
An honor and a privilege to have you on our program. And that brings us to the end of our live broadcast day. Our programs are replayed all throughout the day and archived on our YouTube channel, Igniting a Nation. You can watch us every weekday, Monday through Friday, live 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time, on Facebook Live, on the IANBN network at ignitinganation.com or IANBN.com. You can also get access to 10 years worth of teaching archives of my sermons and teachings over the past 10 years, and an up-to-date calendar of all of our upcoming events and authors and interviews, as well as an opportunity to sign up for our newsletter, which will keep you up to date every 2 weeks on who we have coming up. You don't want to miss an opportunity to meet a Sarah Rodriguez. I didn't want to miss an opportunity to meet her, and I know that you wouldn't either. So we thank you for following us, for over 400,000 of you who in 6 months have decided to join with us to bring this message of the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. And so until we see you right back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Central Time for Revealing the Truth, we bid you shalom.